So, as we talk about making time for engagement in the newsroom, our days are really busy. Journalist days are really busy. And I would love to hear from you, Mike, about how, in the middle of a busy day running a newsroom, you make time for getting back to people who get in touch with you, for answering questions from the community, and that sort of thing.
I mean, one of the things that I just always think about is there's always time for the things we prioritize. And so if you truly believe as a newsroom or as a newsroom leader that communicating with the public and engaging with the public and answering questions and building trust with your audience is important, then you have to find ways to make that time into your schedule, whether that's building a block of time in your day, if that's your time that you're going to answer phone calls and emails and social media questions, or whether that's making sure that you complete that task as any other task on your to-do list. And so that's one of those starting points for me. I believe that one of the most fundamental parts of my job is to, in a way, be sort of the public-facing, ombudsman-like figure for our news organization. Yes, we have news anchors who are probably way more well-known than me, but they can't speak for the station the same way that I can, in the same way that I feel like I have a responsibility to. And so someone's got to answer those questions, I feel like if we truly want people to believe us and to trust us, and every time they ask us a question, it just goes into this void of nothingness, I wouldn't believe us either. We have to make sure that people have a chance to be heard, or at least to be acknowledged, and that the email was received. Sometimes my answers to people's emails are as simple as, thank you for your feedback. And that's all, because there's really nothing else that I can say that's going to be constructive in that situation. People probably don't always like that response. They probably wish I said something different, but at least they got a response back. So I think it really just comes down to prioritization of what matters to your news organization and what matters in your specific newsroom role. And if you truly value trust and transparency and engagement, then you have to find a way to build that into your schedule. You have to find a way to make things happen. And the other thing that goes with that is all of this stuff is a skill like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So while it might feel really daunting right now to respond to 20 emails from angry members of your audience, the more you do it, the better at it you get, and the less time it takes. You'll start to be able to identify patterns of things and ways you can respond, and it'll just come a lot more natural. When I first started doing this, it wasn't always easy. And there's still days when it's not always easy. Look, we work in a complicated business. Things are not always transparent, or they're not always straightforward. And what we do doesn't make everyone happy. I mean, there's probably every single story we do, we probably make some people happy and some people unhappy. And sometimes the criticisms are founded and sometimes they're not. So it's not always easy, but it gets easier with time because you just start flexing those muscles. And it makes it, sort of like wiring in your brain of how to best communicate and answer to questions or concerns about your journalism.
It's absolutely true, I think, that we have to prioritize. And one challenge of journalism these days is that there's more and more on our plate, and we can't just always get a bigger plate. So sometimes you do have to decide what not to do. So are there any tips you can offer about how you prioritize when you see some feedback or some pushback on a story, or clearly some misunderstandings people have about how journalism works? How do you prioritize when to actually be sure to set aside that time, and when it might be less crucial if you're just slammed and can't make the time?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I put this as one of my highest priorities. So it's usually less of an issue of me about prioritization as far as time. Like when this stuff happens, unless they're literally something that's on fire and I have no choice but to devote my attention to something else. This is one of the top priorities, and so I put my attention on engagement. But I think another way to get at that question is how do you decide which responses, especially when it comes to comments on social media, deserve or need you to respond back to them. So Facebook and Twitter, for example, I mean, we could post something relatively innocuous even, and there might be 200 comments on there, and maybe 50 of them are about our actual journalism, and some of those there's no point in responding to them, because there's not a question being asked. There's not anything that we need to necessarily refute. So I try to pick my spots when it comes to things like that, because you can spend all day, responding to Facebook and Twitter comments and never really get anywhere. It's like a drop in the bucket. It's like back when we used to have, we don't currently, but back when we used to have comments on our website, and you'd have to approve them or review them, and it's like it felt like if I just approved or reviewed 100 comments, while I was doing that, we got 200 more. And it's like, you end up in time bankruptcy, because you can never dig out of that hole. And so, but I think that if you're good about recognizing where can you actually educate someone in your comments, or where do you need to respond to a question, I think that those are the places that I start when it comes to responding on social media, because I think if you get into a sort of back and forth with a troll who's just coming at you over and over and over again, at some point in time, you're losing any effectiveness, and there's just no point. Like, where there's someone on Twitter who is you're a fake media, and I don't know how this guy spends his time or prioritizes his time, but literally every single thing I tweet, he responds to it in some way that's very negative, anti-media. And I probably responded the first time he responded to me. And after that, there's just no point. Like I can't like spend every single time I tweet something, I can't respond and defend the media or defend my news organization from someone who's clearly never going to believe anything I say anyway. So there's really no value in that. So I think that those are the spots where like I really try to identify, is there something I can do here that's constructive? Or is this just going to end up being a back and forth with someone who is going to be an immovable object here? If someone emails or calls, I always try to respond to those. Even some of the ones that are have profanity or are incredibly rude, I try to at least respond. If they leave a phone number, I call it back. If they don't leave a phone number and they seem to have a genuine question that I can answer, and it's not just a rant, I will do a little detective work and find the phone number and call them back. But if they don't leave a phone number and I don't feel like there's any point in returning the phone call and they're not asking for me to return the phone call, then I might not return that one. Emails, I respond to all of them. In some way, again, even if it might just be, thank you for your feedback. And I think another thing too, that you just have to really think about is how much effort did they take to try to contact you, right? So Facebook or Twitter, there's not a lot of effort involved there, right? They just saw a post and maybe commented. They're not directing it directly at you personally. They're just leaving a comment for your news organization. So the level of effort put forth by the audience is relatively small. So I will still respond to those, or our team will respond to those, but probably not as diligently as we would to someone who went on our website and found the phone number for the news director so that they could personally call me and leave me a 2-minute long voicemail message, which is how long you can leave before the voicemail cuts off. Those people put forth some energy. Their level of investment and their level of passion about whatever it is they're contacting us is much higher. And so I think that they deserve a little bit more effort in that response.
And as you said at the beginning, if they don't ever hear from us, why would they trust us?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like at some point in time, you really start to wonder, does anyone really care? And I've had people who I've returned their phone calls or emails. In fact, I probably once a week, I return a phone call or an email to someone and they say, oh, I didn't expect a response. Or back when we were in the midst of pandemic and we were dealing with a lot of phone calls about things like there's people struggle to get unemployment. I would return phone calls, and literally probably 3 or 4 times a week on the unemployment topic, I would return phone calls and they would say, I've called 50 people and you're the first person who's called me back. And now they're not all journalists, but still, like, the fact that someone calls them back, that matters to them. That matters to real people when you take the time to actually respond to them. And you talk about the ability to build trust or build a fan base of people in your community. I think it starts with doing the unexpected sometimes. And sometimes the unexpected shouldn't be unexpected. It shouldn't be that difficult to just pick up the phone or respond to an email. But when that happens, it kind of creates this moment of like, oh my gosh, someone actually does care. They are listening, versus the opposite end of it, where it's like, well, the news organization just sits in their ivory tower and, pontificates about what's best for all of us out here in the real world, kind of thing.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.